God's ways are so far above our ways as the heavens are above the earth.
The synthesis of the gospel is Jesus himself. At the end, forever, you and I will be in heaven or hell, period.
Well, I come to the end of my road. This is my last talk at this conference this year. Like my grandmother used to say, time flies when you're having fun. New war, old war. Spiritual training, weapons, tactics. Our Lady, woman clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, the crown of 12 stars on her head. And the words of Jesus that ring out through the ages. I have come to serve, not to be served. And that's what I want to leave you with in this last few minutes or so that I have to be with you. I have often told you that when I was ordained a priest back in 1991 on Trinity Sunday, my superior and I stayed up all night in the chapel at the Vatican where we were staying. We stayed up all night praying. We would pray the Rosary, and then he would talk to me like a good father, giving advice to his son. And Father Jim Flanaghan is so very much my spiritual father. Great, great priest. Great, great man. He's kind of a hero, a very humble man, but I look up to him so much. He once asked his mom, his father had died at a rather young age. His dad was an attorney in Boston, 9 children. Father Jim's brother was district attorney of Boston, probably 20 years. Had another brother, head of the philosophy department at Boston College for many years. But he once asked his mother, was Dad a great man? What was he really like? And his mom said, Jimmy, if you're ever half the man your father was, you will be one heck of a man. And I think he always remembered it. And he's the greatest man that I've ever met. Not just the greatest priest. He's the greatest man I've ever met. Even on a human level. All-American end on the national championship, Notre Dame football team back in the 40s. Navy SEAL, many, many missions during World War II, both in Europe and in the South Pacific. Founded the Society of Our Lady, responsible for the ordination of hundreds of priests. Done great work. And we stayed up that night before my ordination, and we prayed all night long before the Blessed Sacrament. And he gave me great advice. And now, a little more than 10 years later, I can tell you, I don't remember a thing he said. Except one thing. Except one thing. Always come as a servant. That's what he said to me. Always come as a servant. And everything else that he said to me was wrapped up in that, connected to that, intertwined with that. The words of Jesus from the gospel. The Son of Man has come to serve, not to be served. Now, how does that fit in to this war I've been talking about. It defines our mission. Defines our mission. Just like President John Kennedy once said, ask not so much what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Ask not so much what heaven can do for you, but what you can do for heaven. Come as a servant. Now that's easy to say, hard to do at times. I look out at a lot of wonderful married couples. Some of you have been married a good long time. And you know the meaning of in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. You know the meaning of those words better than anybody else. Husbands and wives know what it means to be servants. Now, I'm going to give you the secret of happiness right now. So let those who have ears hear, and let those who have eyes see. As things heat up in the world, as I assure you they will, the fire has already been started. The flames are already in progress. But as things get worse, I'm going to tell you how to be at peace. Always come as a servant. Wives, when you approach your husband, your attitude toward your husband, come as a servant. And well, you may think that that's beneath you. And husbands, I'm talking to you as well. This is equal opportunity sermon. Wives, serve your husbands, and husbands, serve your wives. Listen, if Jesus did it, who the heck are we not to? If Jesus humbled himself, accepting the form of a slave. Now, very often in contemporary translations of Scripture, we lose some of the meaning of the original. Now, in those particular translations where we often see the word servant, that's a mild term. The real word in Koine Greek, the language of the New Testament, was doulos, and it means slave. It means slave. Our Lady, the humble slave of the Lord. Handmaid is more benign. Handmaid doesn't offend our contemporary sensibilities as much. A slave, that has a bad connotation in our culture. So we don't use it. But the real word in the New Testament was slave. Generally speaking, slaves do hard things and dirty things. Slaves do things nobody else wants to do. And Jesus said, I have come to serve and not to be served. And it was in the context of that word, doulos, slave. If you come always as a servant, you really can never be disappointed. Now, I remember as clear as though it were yesterday, the vigil of Trinity Sunday, staying up with my superior, praying all night, and I can hear his words, come always as a servant. And then the next day I was ordained a priest by the Pope. 10,000 people, and I have often thought of it as my wedding day. You know, you married people remember your wedding day. Well, in an analogous way, priests are married too. we have a vow of celibacy, of course. I don't mean married in a physical sense. But Jesus is called the bridegroom in Scripture. Jesus is the high priest. And every priest who is ordained is taken up in Christ, the high priest. So, Jesus the bridegroom, and who's his bride? The church. The beautiful bride of Christ. And so there I was at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. Trinity Sunday, May 26, 1991. The Pope ordains me a priest. I floated out of the basilica. And for months, I would wake up in the middle of the night out of a dead sleep saying, I'm a priest. I'm a priest. Thank God. I'm a priest. I couldn't believe it. Neither could most of heaven. And it was wonderful. I loved being a priest. I loved to celebrate Mass. I loved to give Holy Communion to the faithful. I loved to hear confessions. I just loved preaching. I loved being a priest. And my bride, wow, what a beautiful, mystical bride. Jesus gave me his own bride. And then the honeymoon ended. As it always does. And early one morning, after a fitful night of sleep, it was kind of like I woke up. I looked over, and I said, what have I done? You don't look as good as you used to. Bride, I work and I slave my fingers to the bone. You don't appreciate me. Sound familiar? You've been there and done that. As the years go on and the gloss of mere emotions wear thin, as chemistry is replaced by reality, we find out that indeed you got to come as a servant. You've got to come always as a servant. This is the way Jesus fought the war. This is the way that he overcame the power of evil. Remember how evil came to be. Pride, disobedience, death. The offset, humility, obedience, life. Come always as a servant. In order to be a servant, you've got to be humble. Like the gospel said today. Take the lowest place at the wedding feast, that the master might call you up higher, and you win the respect of all the other people at the wedding feast. Catholics should be very different from the rest of the world. Catholics should not only be faithful to their religion, Catholics should not only be zealous for the faith, Catholics should be the best at everything. Catholics should be the best physicians. Catholics should be the best doctors. Catholics should be the best lawyers, accountants, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers. Catholics should be the best. Why? It says in the Bible, whatever we do for the Lord. Now, if you're doing it for the Lord, how good should it be? Mom, when you cook dinner, who are you cooking for? Jesus or the old man? The old man can wear you out. And the old man is human. And he may not thank you, and it may seem like he doesn't appreciate you, even though he does. He's human. Jesus, however, is not only true God, but true man. He's fully human. And so whatever you do for the Lord is never lost. I remember a story a religious sister told me. She was novice mistress of the Missionaries of Charity at their novitiate in San Francisco, and I preached a retreat to them a while back. Sister Lysa, who's now second counselor next to Sister Nirmala. She's third from the top now over in Calcutta. She told me they had, when they got to the building, the convent, Mother was going to come and inspect. Now, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, in case you don't know it, had an eminently military mind. Mother Teresa was a commander-in-chief. The first time I went to the convent in San Francisco, they took me in the room where I stayed, where I came in and out of to preach, where I rested, took my meal. It reminded me of the war room in the Army that I remembered from the 1960s. Big map of the world, and it had pins, hundreds of pins. And I said, what are all those pins in the world? And they said, well, that's every place we occupy territory. We've got over 500 houses all over the world, over 5,000 sisters serving the poorest of the poor. And although it looks like there's a lot of pins up there, the way Mother looks at it, she says, look at all that space without pins. We've got to occupy enemy territory. We've got to come as servants. If you come as a servant, it's a lot easier not to be disappointed. If you come as a servant, it's a lot easier not to be offended when people do not respect you, accept you, or appreciate you. Come always as a servant. We know the word authority. There's authority in the church. Sometimes, like all spheres of human existence, authority has been abused in places in the church as well as in the world. The Holy Father has articulated very clearly in recent years that the only authentic authority in the church and in the world is the authority of service. That's why the Holy Father is called the servant of the servants of God, his highest title, by the way. Do you want to know the highest form of service? That is the highest form of authority. The greatest authority is the authority of service. The highest form of service, crucifixion. Mom knows about that. So does Dad. So does the pastor. So does everyone who serves others. Who's called to serve others? Everybody. The hierarchy. We have a hierarchy. God first, everybody else second, me last. Easy to say, hard to do. That is a blueprint, however, for victory. Please remember that. That's a blueprint for victory. I look at the Holy Father these days, and I see a very tired, sick, long-suffering servant of the servants of God. For many, many decades, he has had no time of his own. He belongs to the church. He's a gift for the church. A lot of people don't like him. A lot of people didn't like Jesus. You can't please everybody, but you can serve everybody. Sometimes, the more faithfully you serve, the more you will be crucified. I've only been a priest 10 years. Not very long. And I'm already almost an old guy. But in that 10 years, I have never been so conscious of being loved and hated. Never in my life. And I did a lot in my life before. I know about athletics, I know about the military, I know about business. I've been there and done that, all of it. Never until I was ordained a priest was I so conscious of intense love and intense hatred. Never in all the days when I was hustling in the business world did anybody ever spit on me. Never in all my days hustling money did anybody ever threaten to kill me. I had to be ordained first to get that privilege. Literally. The only joy, the only peace that you will ever have is giving yourself to others. You try to hold on to it, you'll lose it. You'll lose it, you lose your life. For his sake, you'll gain it. You try to hang on, do things for yourself, be egocentric, you'll lose everything. You will be impoverished. Jesus, though he was rich, became poor. Why? In order to enrich us through his poverty. Jesus, though he was in the form of God, he is God, did not deem equality with God something to be grasped at. Who did that? Satan. Eve. He did not deem equality with God something to be grasped at. Rather, he emptied himself, obediently accepting the form of a slave. He was born in the likeness of men. And it was thus that God highly exalted him, bestowing upon him the name above every other name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee must bow and every tongue proclaim to the glory of God the Father that Jesus Christ is Lord. Why did God highly exalt him? Because he humbled himself. He obediently accepted even death. Death on a cross, the worst form of death. Jesus says the servant is no better than his master. Jesus says, where I am, there my servant will be. Have a look. There he is. Why? When he began to reveal what would happen to him, his passion and death, resurrection, they didn't want it to happen. Remember what Peter said? No, no, Lord, this cannot be. Remember what he said to Peter? Get behind me, Satan. It is necessary that I be lifted up. It is necessary that I be lifted up in order to draw all men to myself. You want to know why it is necessary that you and I be lifted up? That's why. No pain, no gain. No cross, no crown. No gall, no glory. No battle, no victory. Period. Exclamation point. No other way. If I knew a way, I would tell you. I've been looking for a way for years. No other way. Got to go the way the Master went. It is called the Via Dolorosa, the way of the cross, the way of sorrow. That doesn't mean that we have to walk around being visibly sorrowful at every moment. No. Why? Because we know where we're headed. That's why. Oh, we have a lot of pain. We have a lot of suffering. I am not that old, but I have seen much. Many of you have seen a lot more than I have. You've been around longer than I have been. You've seen wars come and go. You've seen children born and children die. You've had great joys and you've had great sorrows. Some of you are great heroes, in my mind. In the end, I think all of you, all of us, will be. And we don't feel like that, but why? Simply because we have walked the path of life. Because we have walked that path as Christians. Because we have endured many sorrows. Oh, some of you say, no, I really haven't. I've had a wonderful life. And my very simple response to you is, ain't over. God can do more in a minute than 100 years of mere human effort. I think my father suffered 20 normal passions in the last few years of his life. My father was a big, strong, athletic man. And I remember him when I was a boy, when he was still in his prime. He could run faster than anybody else. He was stronger than anybody else. He was a great athlete. He boxed. Semi-pro, they called it in that. He was really professional for a while. He wasn't that tall, but he was very, very hard to beat. One of the things he taught me, not unimportant, was this: never quit. Never quit. You might be outclassed, outweighed, outgunned in every way. Never quit. Now, there's a principle here. He was talking to me about boxing, and that you're going to get in the ring with guys bigger and stronger and faster than you are. But you must have a certain attitude, and the attitude is this: they will have to kill you in order to win. Very simple. Now, I'm obviously not talking about boxing, but I'm talking about an attitude. I'm talking about a very essential attitude in this combat, in this war, which is spiritual and moral, more than anything else. Don't be a quitter. I remember the toughest fight that I was ever in the Golden Gloves. I was almost to the end. Really 2 fights from winning my division for the Northeast, entire Northeast of the United States. And the guy I had to get in the ring with, he was much better than me. He was in a different category. He went on to become a professional boxer. After the first round, I knew that it was going to be a long night. And we only fought 3 rounds. 9 minutes can be a very long time. 9 minutes can be an eternity. Your whole life can pass before you. The thought came into my head, you're going to get hurt. Another thought came into my head, why don't you just lay down? Discretion is the better part of valor sometimes. Nobody could blame you. And I thought of my father. I could never face my father as a quitter. I could never endure the withering scorn of his gaze if I threw the fight. If I laid down and quit, it would have been much easier to have been beaten to death. Don't be a quitter. Very simple lesson. Now, the application of that, well, there are millions of applications. Now, you and I hope, I pray, that you will have long, happy, prosperous lives. And then you will go singing off to heaven. And there you will be happy forever. But I know for many of us, between here and there will be many a trial, many a pain, many a cross. You and I, at times, will be tried to within an inch of our endurance. We will be pushed beyond our endurance. In fighting that good fight and running that race to the finish line, you'll be severely tested, immersed in the crucible and the fire of testing and purification. God wants to burn off the dross. He wants to see in you the pure gold of his Son. He wants to temper you like steel in the fire. He wants to make a mighty sword out of you. And when that sword goes into battle, it better be tempered, strong, so it doesn't break in combat. That's you. And that's me. Your battle may take the form of cancer. God forbid. Your battle may take the form of some other illness, heart disease, or your battle may take the form of emotional struggle, depression, anxiety. Every bit as difficult as physical suffering, maybe worse. Your battle may take the form of bereavement and loss. You ever think about how much collective suffering materialized in an instant on September 11th? How many families were plunged into the depths of sorrow in the twinkling of an eye? Your suffering, your cross may take the form of a moral struggle. Perhaps you have been enslaved to a sin or series of sins for years. Perhaps you hate your sin, but are enslaved to your sin. Oh, it may be drugs. It may be alcohol addiction. It may be pornography. It may be any number of things. And it has a hold on you. And you hate it. And you do anything to overcome it. That can be painful. And God permits it. Why? To bring a greater good out of it. No hero ever became a hero without a struggle. No one ever received the Congressional Medal of Honor without having been one heck of a soldier, going above and beyond the call of duty. That can take many forms in this battle. It can become complicated and confusing. Don't allow that to happen. Always return to one thought. Come always as a servant. Remember that Jesus came to serve, not to be served. Jesus, who is God, the author and architect of the universe, the master, came to serve. Who's the servant? Not to come to serve? And you say, well, how can I do this? In simple ways, in everyday ways. The exhaustion at times is difficult. But so what? It's the mission. Am I exhausted as some of you moms have been, up all night with the baby? Oh, I bet some of you have been real tired. And I often think, somewhere right now in Afghanistan, the successors of the unit I was briefly with, they're in the mountains someplace right now. And it's cold, and it's dark, and it's inhospitable. And they might be hungry, and they're not sure if they'll come home alive. And they're thinking about their wives and children, and moms and dads. And they're thinking about Michigan State winning the game today in the last play. And they couldn't see it. And I say, am I worse off than those guys? No. And when I feel sorry for myself, I got to remind myself, come always as a servant. And when I come to serve and I'm not appreciated and perhaps even rejected and perhaps even persecuted, am I better than the master? Should my lot be better than his? Come always as a servant. A lot has happened between last year and this year. Since I last saw you at this conference, an awful lot of water has gone under the bridge. Between right now and a year from now, I wonder what will happen. I wonder what the state of the world will be a year from now. I wonder how the new kind of war is going to be a year from now. I wonder what new novel form of attack they'll come up with between now and then. In a world of so much uncertainty, there's one thing you can be certain of. Come always as a servant. And you'll never be disappointed. Come always as a servant, and you will have an inner peace and a joy that It's hard to describe. If you don't come as a servant, you will be regularly disappointed, discouraged, upset, and angry. For many, many, many times, even those who love you will not fully appreciate you. But there's one thing for certain. God sees everything. There's one thing for certain. No good deed goes unnoticed by the good God. No tear that you could ever shed for injustice, children gone the wrong way, any evil, those tears are stored up in heaven like treasure, like precious diamonds. God stores them for you. Nothing's lost on God. So, as you move forward through life, come always as a servant. The Master will send you from time to time missions. In the Army, we used to get a mission. You know, the mission is blow up the bridge. The mission is take the hill. The mission is whatever. Now, God will send you missions from time to time. Last couple of days, maybe the mission for some of you was putting up with me. Oh, no small thing. I've had a lot of wives tell me, "Oh, Father, I love your tapes. I play them all the time. My husband, however, cannot stand the sound of your voice." There was one good Irish-American lady, she played my tapes incessantly. And her husband he was a decent man, but he couldn't stand the sound of my voice. They went on vacation to visit her relatives in Ireland. They were in County Cork. They hadn't been in the house 10 minutes, and from a back room came a voice. And the husband stopped and he said, "I know that voice. I know that voice. He's not here, is he?" Her great aunt had somehow got a hold of some of my tapes. She's 90 years old playing them in the back room. The old man almost got on the airplane and flew home. In the days of the old saints, you know, they used to do a lot of penance. And one of the forms of penance is that they wore a hair shirt. You know, that was very uncomfortable, scratchy. Nowadays, we don't wear hair shirts anymore, because now we realize that your hair shirt may be sitting next to you. You could even be married to your hair shirts. Yeah, a lot of people rub us the wrong way. Come always as a servant. You'll be able to put up with it. Servants do hard things. God will send you missions to serve Him. Yeah, maybe today it's putting up with someone. Maybe tomorrow, looking the other way when somebody insults you. Being a peacemaker when somebody's trying to cause trouble. Being kind when it's easy to be mean. Another time the mission will come, delivered in the form of a medical report, the results of a physical that says something wrong. That's a mission from headquarters. You know what you're dealing with. It's a mission from headquarters. On September 12th, I talked to a man who works with me, travels with me periodically. He had been in the Marines. He was an officer in the Marines back in the 60s. We're the same age. Did his tour in Vietnam. He had a brother 4 blocks from the World Trade Center. He lived. I said, "Sal, Your brother okay? Yeah, my brother's okay. What have you been doing? I called the Marines, see if they'd take me back. My age, 54. See if I could get with my unit. Maybe they need me. Said, what'd you do today? Said, I did the same thing. They don't have any Catholic chaplains in the United States Army. There's a terrible shortage. And there's been for years. They'll even waive the age requirement. Normally you have to be 40 when you receive your commission. Willing to waive it. I had a physical. And my little minor heart condition is twice as bad as they thought it was. Doubled the medication. My blood pressure is more than it should be. Doubled that medication. And I'm mostly deaf in my left ear. And about 50% in my right. No place for you in this man's army, fat old guy. But there's an old kind of war where you're always useful. There's an old kind of war where the older you get, the more useful you get. Because generally the older you get, the more aches and pains you have. As my grandma would say, you got more to offer up, ain't it grand? The older that you get, the more mileage you have on you. And like my daddy was like an old car. Parts wearing out, left and right. They replace this one, replace that one, keep him on the road, and he goes a while longer. And there's a dignity in that. There's a power in that. There is a greatness in that. Fighting the good fight. Running the race to the finish line, knowing beyond any shadow of a doubt that you are contributing to the salvation of your brothers and sisters, quite simply because you're united to Christ. You're one with Him. And you don't think you're heroes. You don't feel like great warriors. You feel quite small, if you feel like me. And you feel quite insignificant. And you don't feel capable of any great victories. And you don't think they're ever going to pin a medal on you. And yet, one day, when the dust settles, and the smoke of battle is cleared away, and time gives way to eternity, you're going to stand before the chief, who really matters, the boss, the general, who really matters. And then all that hidden fidelity, all the redemptive suffering, all of that then will have its recompense. All your rosaries, all your acts of sacrifice and charity, you know, it's all being stored up for you. Not that you're trying to get anything for yourself, but you can't outdo the good God in generosity. Our priests, most of them hidden, quietly working, faithfully, unheralded, good moms and dads, good religious sisters, getting very little credit now for lives of total sacrifice. Oh, I know a lot of sisters who could have been brain surgeons. Oh, yeah, they're that intelligent. Oh, they could have flown right through their education. I literally know a cardiologist who's a Carmelite nun now. Another one who was a Wall Street lawyer. No money, no power, no prestige. By the world's standards, no success. And yet the words of Mother Teresa come back to us. God doesn't need your success, only your fidelity. Only your fidelity. One day at a time, 1 hour at a time, everything you do, do it for the Lord. Come as His servant and the servant of your brothers and sisters. If you're washing the floor, changing the diapers, whatever, do it perfectly. Who are you doing it for? Jesus, I hope. And because of that, you will be contributing to the war effort. Because of that, you'll be bringing down grace on creation. Because of that, wisdom will be infused into our leaders. Because of that, charity will once again flourish in our society. Because of that, impurity will be driven out. Evil will give place to good. Lies will be vanquished by truth. The darkness will be pushed out by that light against which the darkness could not, cannot, and will not prevail. This is an absolute, irrefutable truth. My brothers and sisters, I don't know when or if I'll ever see some of you again in this life. But I do know that if you remain faithful, if you will run this race to the finish line, if you will fight this good fight, coming as a servant, always as a servant, one day you and I together are going to be very happy. One day you and I together will rejoice for all eternity, clothed with the mantle of light that is the reward for God's friends. One day indeed, when time gives way to eternity, and you and I stand before God, you're going to hear the words, "Well done. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter in to the joy of your master's house." God love you. God bless you. And goodbye.